Here we have my 1987 325i. This is an early model, so the following procedures might not apply to your car. And if you want to verify that you have the same components that I do, there's a great resource. It's a website called realoem.com, and they have diagrams for all of the systems, and they have part numbers for everything. So check that before you do this. The current coolant in here is some unknown green stuff, and the BMW coolant is blue. So I'm going to be doing the first thing I'm going to do is a complete system flush. You want to get all of the old coolant out before you add new stuff in, because sometimes when you mix coolants, they could form gunk and clog up your radiator and your cooling system. So you never want to mix unknown coolants. If you don't feel like spending the money to get the BMW stuff, or you don't want to wait for it to come in the mail because it's not at the auto parts store, you could use 50% phosphate-free ethylene glycol, and that's straight from the book. So according to BMW, that'll be safe for your cooling system. I'm also going to be replacing the thermostat and all 11 coolant hoses. That's right, there's 11 of them. I didn't know this until like 10 minutes ago. But here, I'll show you where they're all at. So here's the water pump to your reservoir. Goes down there, and your water pump's down there. And then you have your upper radiator hose from your radiator to your thermostat housing. And then you have your water pump to your thermostat. And then you have your lower radiator hose that goes from your thermostat housing to your lower radiator. That's 4. And you got 2 more off of your throttle body. So if you look here, I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, right there, those guys with the hose clamps on them. So it's the inlet and outlet for your throttle body. And they go, let's see, one of them goes down here to the bottom of your thermostat housing. I think the other one goes to your block down here. That's where the second hose from the thermostat housing, throttle body, goes. It goes into the block. And so that's like 6. And now, last 5 are all associated with your heater core. And this is what tripped me up. So you got one here that goes from your thermostat housing and runs all the way down here. And then it goes to this T connector, right where my finger's at. And then this hose is your heater core inlet. And the bottom one is the heater core outlet. Back to the T connector. You see this little thin hose here. It turns out that, at least on these early models, there's a second thermostat for the heater core, and that thing sits down here. And then from the heater core thermostat, there's your final hose, and you can see it. I'm zooming in on it, trying to zoom in on it right now, right where that hose clamp is at the bottom in the center of the screen. So to recap, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11, all the way down there at the bottom. And if any one of these fail, then your car ain't gonna run. Or it will, but it might be a bad day. So it's a good idea to replace all of them. So step number 1 is see what the book says. If you own an E30 and you don't have one of these things, you're all screwed up, and you should go and buy one immediately and then come back once you have one. These things are super helpful, and they have like, it doesn't have everything, but it has like 80% of what you need for a job. Now I personally don't know how to read, but I just like looking at the pictures because they're pretty. Step number 2 is make sure you have all of your materials on hand before you start the job. Like I didn't. I thought there was only 6 hoses. It turns out there's 11. So now I'm gonna wait 2 weeks to actually do this job. But on the subject of materials, when it comes to cooling systems, the procedure always says to use distilled water. Now, why is that? Well, it turns out some really spooky stuff happens in your engine bay. Here's what I mean by that. So your block is cast iron, your head is aluminum, and your radiator core is probably copper. Now, for some spooky science reasons, when you have fluid flow that has, unlike metals, the particulate contamination, so like the random stuff that is in tap water, like the random minerals and stuff, as that circulates, it gains an electrical charge. And this electrical charge jumps between the hoses or some shit. I don't know how it works. But as it does that, it causes the hoses to fail at the ends. So most people think that hoses fail just because it's rubber and it deteriorates and it gets crusty. That's not really the reason. It's called electrochemical something or other. I don't know. I'll put some references in the description. But so what I'm trying to say is, the less contamination, right, the less charge that your coolant can circulate, right, the purer the water antifreeze mixture is, the less electricity it has and the longer your hoses will last. Right, on the subject of hoses, you either want to use EPDM or silicone, because those are resistant to this particular mode of failure. So in other words, if you get cheap hoses and you don't know what they're made of and then they fail in 6 months, that is the reason why. Step number 3 is to drain your coolant. So you actually have 2 drain points. So this is the first one. This is the bottom left side of your radiator, and it's just this plug, which is plastic, so you want to have a new one on hand just in case, or at least get like the little washer thing, because yeah, you want to replace it. And also get a whole bunch of new hose clamps, because you're going to use a lot of them, and trust me, just new hose clamps will make your life so much more easy. But yeah, so you drain your radiator here, and then you come over to the passenger side of your engine block, and there is a drain plug. And I'm going to zoom in on it right there. It's a lot like an oil drain plug. Now, after draining your radiator and your block, there's still going to be residual coolant in your heater core, and there's a couple ways to get it out. What I'm going to try to do is pour some water in there and blow it out with compressed air once the hoses are detached. We'll see how that works. We can start taking our hoses off. So you want to be real careful. The ones that are connected to the radiator, these ends are plastic. This part of the radiator is plastic, and there might be a bunch of gunk holding it on. So if it's stuck on there, right, don't pry it too hard or else you'll break your radiator. What you should do is just, if it's stuck on there good, just cut it off, right? Don't pry on it back and forth. All right, so I got all the coolant drained. Now what you want to do is take a wire brush, clean up all this gunk that's built up on these connections here, so that your hose could get a good seal. And for the drain that's on the side of the block, do yourself a favor and soak it in some penetrating oil over a few days. This thing is a 19 millimeter, by the way, and when you're working on tough bolts that are stuck, always want to use 6-sided drivers, because these 12-sided ones, they'll round out everything that you work on. So you know, always go with the 6-sided one. Also, whenever you're cleaning metal with a wire brush, always use brass wire brushes, because if you use a steel wire brush, it'll scratch the metal and it might affect the ability of the hose to make a seal. To get to your thermostat, it's just these 3 10mm bolts. It'll sit like that, and there's the thermostat right there. I also got new bleed screws. These things are notorious for getting stuck, and the last one was all rounded out, and it just sits right here. Now you're gonna pull this guy out. Oh man, looks like I'm gonna need a screwdriver for this one. But once you pull it out, again, take a brass wire brush, clean up all the gunk where the O-ring will sit, and just install the new one. And when you install the new one, make sure that this little arrow is pointing up, so it's gonna sit at the 12 o'clock position. Next, with your lower radiator hose disconnected, you wanna loosen this side of the hose and just pour some distilled water in there to rinse out all of the old stuff. And once it flows clear, you know you'll be done. So I already did a couple rinses, so it's pretty clear. But yeah, if your radiator's really gunked up, like your coolant's really gross looking, you can take a garden hose and flush it forwards and backwards with the pressurized water. It's just after you do that, make sure you flush it with distilled water to get all the contaminants out. Also, while your thermostat's still removed, just take some distilled water and rinse it out, because its gunk definitely fell in there while you were cleaning it up. So we'll just get that out of there. That's coming out of the side of the block, and it looks like it's pretty clean. Next, I'm gonna pull off the rest of the hoses. So there's 2 here on the thermostat, and then these 2 for the throttle body, and then the rest of these, because in order to replace the bottom ones, you'd have to remove the top ones to have room to work. Also, in regards to the throttle body heater, a lot of guys like to delete them, but I'll tell you, if you live somewhere where it gets cold, like below freezing, the whole purpose of the heater is to prevent the freezing of your throttle body. So like what could happen is, if it's below freezing, right, and you go for a drive, you might step on the gas pedal and open the throttle, and then it might freeze in that position and not return shut, and then so your accelerator might be stuck with an open throttle, which is a bad idea. So that's the purpose of the heater. So if you live somewhere cold, don't delete them. Also, before you start pulling all these little hoses, make sure you take a picture to remember which ones go where. Oh man, look at that. That is gross. See, these hoses get really gunked up, so in order to make removal easier, you can just slide a flat tip in there and gently just pry it around like that. You might have to spin on it too, but it'll come off. Just be patient. Don't pry too hard, because this thing is plastic. And then, I don't know if the heater core ends are plastic or metal, but you don't want to pry on them too hard. All right, that took way too long, but I got them off. Those 2 back ones are going to be a real pain. So this one and that one back there. Yeah, right there. And you're gonna need to invent some sort of monstrosity of extensions and swivels. Those clamps should be a 6mm You might be able to get a quarter on them too. But yeah, you're gonna have to get creative there. But yeah, now that everything is out, this is how everything looks once it's connected. So also I had to cut a few of them off, so be ready to do that because these things did not want to come off. But this is the thermostat for the heater core, and so everything sits like this, right? So this comes off your thermostat housing, right? This part goes into the top of your heater core, so that part goes there. This part goes to that back one. And this part goes to the bottom. So the whole purpose of this thing, right? It's actually a recall that was installed. I think applicable to all E30s. So if your car has it, great. If your car does not have it, you might want to get it installed, because the whole purpose of the heater core thermostat, right? Your heater core sits down here. It's like behind this thing. And what kept happening was the heater core would overpressurize for some reason. And when it did that, it would explode right all over people's feet. So imagine that happening while you're going 80 on the highway and you're getting, you know, boiling hot coolant all over your legs. So that is the purpose of the thermostat. A lot of guys like to delete them because they simplify the cooling system, but that is a bad idea. So now we're gonna clean up all of these connections and then reinstall our hoses, starting with those two back ones first. Actually, before you put those hoses back on, take this long one, stick it on there, stick it on the bottom one. I actually got it backwards. The bottom is the inlet, the top is the outlet. And we're gonna get the rest of that coolant out. And if you don't have an air compressor, or you don't feel like using it, you can just put your mouth on this thing and blow, like so. Preferably while making eye contact with your neighbors. Oh yeah. If you get antifreeze poisoning, it's not my fault. But yeah, you're gonna wanna pour in some more distilled water and do that again a couple times until it flows clear. And then you'll be able to put your hose back on. By the way, distilled water is not the same as filtered water. Filtered water still has minerals and stuff in it. So distilled water only. Also, when you're doing this, make sure that your key is in at the number 2 position, so you have electricity, and make sure that your selector is at the hottest setting, so that the valve is open and flow is able to go through the heater core. Okay, so I got the heater core thermostat back in after a lot of struggling, and the way I was able to do it is get all 3 of your hoses connected up to it and then just slide it in as one piece, right? So attach this hose, this little hose, and then back here where it connects to the block, attach that all to the thermostat and slide it all in as one piece. Then I was able to finagle that one on. This stuff is going to be your friend, some silicone spray. And make sure you orient the hose clamp up in a direction where you'll be able to get to it. And then I routed this hose, the one that goes to the bottom of your thermostat housing, and just route it through. And now that we're here, I'll be able to connect everything up, right? So the bottom of this hose from the heater core thermostat is gonna go here. Little hose is gonna go on the T connector. Looks like I'm gonna have to trim off a couple inches. And then we'll get the last hose to the top of the heater core. button everything up. Okay, I got all the hoses on, with the exception of the little radiator. I'm about to throw on the thermostat cover. Got the new thermostat in. Make sure you clean this side of the thermostat housing as well with a wire brush. Just gonna throw her on, and when you tighten these, make sure you don't just tighten one all the way down and then tighten the rest down all the way. Go around and tighten all of them a little at a time so that the pressure is even on all the sides. All right, so with all the hoses in, now it's time to fill and bleed the coolant. So what you're gonna do is, you're gonna leave this guy loose and throw some anti-seize on there for good measure. It's April and it's snowing or hailing or some shit. I don't know what the hell is going on. Anyway, so the bleed procedure, right? So we're gonna throw in our coolant drain plug on the side of the block. I got a new plug, but at the very least get a new washer. And so to bleed the fill and bleed the coolant system, right, you're gonna want to raise the car up at least a couple inches, and so that all the air goes to the top, to the high point. So this is the high point, and the air can escape. Right, and we're gonna mix the coolant 50-50. Pour it in here until you start seeing it come out of your thermostat housing. Also got to reinstall the air box. I didn't cover it at the beginning, but removal and installation is really easy. It's just two 10mm bolts, and then you loosen the hose clamp and it'll slide right out. And also you disconnect the sensor, just press it in, pop it out. Once it won't take anymore, give the hoses a couple squeezes. You can see the levels not going down anymore. So what we're gonna do is turn the car on, let it run with the bleed screw still open. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna keep an eye on this, make sure the level doesn't fall below this hose. And we're gonna watch our bleed screw. And once coolant starts coming out of it, we're gonna shut it and open it and shut it over and over again until we get no more air coming out and it's just a steady flow of antifreeze. Also, turn your fan on, because once it starts blowing hot air, you know you'll be done. Sucked up all the coolant, so we're just gonna refill that again and then repeat the process. Well, this is awkward. The alternator has eaten into one of the hoses. That's what that funny sound was. So yeah, lesson learned. Don't be like me. And now it's sunny, because of course it is. Anyway, I'm gonna order a new hose and stay tuned. All right, got the new hose in, properly installed. No funny noises this time. Just went for a drive. The temperature gauge was steady, was blowing hot air. Looks like my coolant level didn't go down anymore. Looks like we're all done. Just you know, over the next few days, over a couple drives, just crack this bleed screw. You might still get some residual air coming out, but yeah.